working. Isn't this great? I love real-time issues. So we are going to go back to this. And David, okay,
Yes.
we're going to start over. We're 9:04. It's only 4 minutes of me like having no idea what I'm doing. So I found David because I am a junkie for documentaries. And so I was watching the documentary Stink, which I don't think is a really great name for a documentary, but it was about this man who bought some pajamas for his daughters and they smelled really bad. So he started to go into research of the toxins that are in the clothing for his children. And David, did you ever watch that video, the documentary?
You know, I checked out the trailer, but I didn't watch the whole thing. It looked really good.
Okay, so somewhere in the middle of that, they have this woman come in and do a whole analysis of his house about toxins and where they have toxins in their house. And of course, then I went on Google and I'm like, I want someone to come in and tell me what to do because I don't want to do all the research. I don't want to have to figure out every single thing. And as we know, Google will tell you 45 different things to do. So I found Green Evolution and David Siddiqui, and I'm in California in the Bay Area. So I'm not sure if David will fly all over the world, but I know we have followers from all over the world. So David, you'll have to just see. But without having David fly to your house, I had him come to my house and go through it all and tell me what to do. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is such great information. They're such easy little things. And it's interesting because I told somebody at a party a couple days later and she said, this is just so overwhelming. It's too overwhelming. And I thought, what are you going to do? Just like do nothing? So David is here to break it down for us on why it is not so overwhelming and what we can do. So minus his video, we just have him verbally, but David, tell us about why you do what you do and the tips we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. Yeah, sorry about the video stuff, but you know, the information's still the same over audio anyway. So yeah, I mean, basically, I personally started working on sustainability issues back in 2000, and that was back before the word green even took on its latest meaning. You know, but finding ways to make tangible improvements to both like human and environmental health has been a really deep and just long-seated passion of mine. So I founded Green Evolution in 2008, and you know, we essentially provide sustainability consulting services to government agencies and utilities and organizations and investors, and then also individuals like yourself.
And like, yeah, 2000, like, I think we might have just started recycling paper back then. I know some people were much better about it, but you know, even recycling seemed like, you know, it doesn't really matter if I do it. But actually, there's another documentary, again, kind of a junkie, called Wasted, W-A-S-T-E-D. And that is about how much food we waste. So that went out too.
Yeah.
So David, give us some tips. I mean, God bless you. You sent me, I think, 14 pages of tips in preparation for this. And I do remind you, we only have 23 minutes now. So we'll kind of zoom through the ones that you think, people can actually do on their own, and which are the most important and the easiest.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, no, that sounds great. And so, you know, I would say probably the first thing that what's helpful to note before actually, you know, diving right into the tips is just keeping in mind that there are 4 main pathways how humans are exposed to toxins. So the first one is absorption. And so that's basically like products that come in contact with your skin, right? The next one is ingestion. So it's basically stuff that you eat or drink, whether intentionally or not. The third one is inhalation, so stuff you breathe. And that relates to both indoor and outdoor air quality. And those are kind of handled separately really in the industry, but we're going to focus on indoor air quality here, obviously. And then the fourth one is injection, which we're not going to get into.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. I'm trying to pull up the paper that you did, and so people can actually see it, but okay, keep going. So there is, I'm sorry, repeat those again.
So absorption,
And absorption,
Ingestion.
that's like the products that you're putting on your face and on your skin. The hand gel you're using, the shower gel, the shampoo, right?
You got it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then ingestion. So those are the things that we're eating.
Eating, drinking. Yeah.
Okay. So all that fast food or processed food, that would be a good example.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Inhalation.
And
So,
then inhalation. Okay.
yep. Yeah. So those are the main ones we're looking at.
And so inhalation, like we don't really think about that because of course that's stuff we don't see. So tell us about some of the things that we inhale that we don't really even know we're inhaling.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There are so many. I mean, actually, there's a really great device that UC Berkeley had developed that, and it's kind of rare to focus on air quality in this way because a lot of times when people look at air quality, they say, okay, here's one contaminant we're looking for, and so let's say it's formaldehyde that off gases out of manufactured wood, or let's say it's carbon monoxide that comes from the combustion of natural gas, or let's say it's radon or whatever. There's usually like a test for one specific compound or maybe like a handful. And you'll use a sensor and kind of figure out, well, how much of this one thing is in the air. But this device from UC Berkeley is amazing because it actually can use I think it's mass spectroscopy to actually take a sample of the air in whatever surroundings it's in, and then literally analyze like every single compound that was in that particular sample and let you know, like, oh, here's everything that was in there. And it's like you can take some random sample and there's literally like, we think about air as being comprised of like oxygen and nitrogen and some of those main core elements, but there's also literally could be dozens, hundreds of other chemical compounds that are sort of floating around in the air around us. So it's pretty incredible, really.
But we can't actually buy that machine from UC Berkeley, right?
No.
Bring that into our house and then say, oh, well, what's in our house? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what can we do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, one of the first most basic ones around just like people reducing their own sort of exposure to toxins is eating organic whenever possible. So I know it's like a really basic tip, and it's one that I'm sure everyone's somewhat familiar with, but it's also really impactful. So I felt like it was important to mention. There are just so many absolutely meaningless environmental marketing claims out there, like eco-friendly or natural, right? You see that on a product label, it doesn't mean anything. And then
you see gluten-free water, and you think, that must be good for me. They put all of these claims. Yeah, and I know that you can write new and improved. You can write natural, right? There's no regulation that says you can't write natural, even if it isn't natural.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of unbelievable, really, but yeah, that's the way it is. So, the nice thing about certified organic is that actually has a really strict legal definition, and it's well established that it's better for both human and environmental health than conventional foods. So, that's just a kind of an easy choice to try to make, in your daily life.
Yeah, and so. Yeah, and organic can be a little bit more expensive. Is there a way that you can, if you do like going to the farmer's market, or are there ways that you can find organic so that it isn't as expensive?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, obviously, farmers markets are good options, and also that keeps it local, which is another sort of environmental impact of your food choices, right? So that's also really helpful.
Great point, right? All of this that we're doing, whether all of this reducing toxins is in our home, is going to reduce toxins in the environment. And okay, sorry, that was such a good point.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things I love about this. There's a lot of overlap where, often, most of the time in these kinds of situations, that when you're making better choices for your own health, it also happens to be a good choice for the environment as well. So it's really convenient.
Double bonus. Okay, so what's next?
So next, I would say, avoiding plastic sort of generally, but I'd say, also like avoiding plastic containers for your food. is really a good idea. So, this is like prepackaged foods you buy that are sitting in some kind of plastic container, your, storage, Tupperware, that kind of stuff. Anytime you can opt for glass instead, even stainless steel is also a good choice. But really trying to avoid, consuming stuff that's been in contact with plastic for an extended period of time is sort of wise precaution.
Okay, so I have a question. I just bought my organic celery and it's in a plastic bag. And you buy your carrots, your organic carrots in plastic bags.
Yeah.
What does that mean? So now I've totally just negated my organic.
Yeah, right. No, yeah, it's a good question. And it's tough. I mean, it is really hard to avoid. And I mean, there's going to be, for most people, like some amount that you just have to deem acceptable. And I know people who've gone really hardcore and basically said, I'm going plastic free for a year, and try to make all those decisions, and it can be really difficult. And so yeah, that kind of approach is not for everyone. So with a lot of this stuff, it's a balancing act, right? You're gonna have to find what works for you, and sort of it's an avoid when possible kind of scenario, right?
Yeah, well, it's better to buy the organic celery in plastic than not buy organic celery at all.
I would say I would agree with that. Yeah.
And I love the idea of getting rid of all the plastic, because if you're like me, you have 14 different bottoms and 34 different tops to plastic containers. And actually, when David was here, I threw them all away in front of him. I'm like, great. So I have like four glass containers. And then also the metal, what are those? Why can't I think of the metal? The containers that you put in your lunch boxes now, and you can use for
like the tiffins.
The tin, for storage.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also important to know. So I did a lot of work on plastic like throughout my career, and I actually did like a pretty interesting little documentary with the CBC on it. But not all plastics are created equal from a leaching and sort of personal health perspective. And so, one thing I think it's, interesting to note, from what I've seen, is that there's much less evidence that polypropylene plastic number 5, inside the little Chasing Arrows logo, there's much less evidence that of that plastic leaching. So it's essentially, compared to the other plastics, it seems to be sort of more inert. And so, essentially probably a little bit safer for public health. So
you can't see the little number in the Chasing Arrows, like if it's not on there. And a lot of people are buying products that say BPA free. So is that good enough if you have BPA free?
Yeah, that's a can of worms right there. Can linings.
See, I'm totally going off your 11 pages of prepared work, but these are the questions that we have.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, and I mean, that's one of the things that it's a tough one for me, because okay, there's been a lot of great research about BPA and some of the potential health problems around it, right? And so there was an effort among sort of food manufacturers and people in the industry to try to find alternatives or get rid of it, because there was consumer demand to not have it. The only issue with that, so it's like generally, if you find something that's BPA free, that's good, but has that product then been has the BPA been replaced with some other chemical that has lesser known properties, right, and hasn't been as well researched, and that is the case sometimes, right? So I think you kind of need to take some of those claims, even BPA free, with a little bit of a grain of salt, and might try and opt for a product that doesn't need any kind of coating like that to begin with. So yeah.
So before, there's a question on Instagram. Does he notice a change in his health by avoiding all these things? Does it help? I think sometimes we stop using plastic and then we think, well, I don't see a difference, So, and David did tell me actually when I met him that he's, trying to live to be 150, right? So some of this is a long game.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about what you feel right now and what you think about it for the long run.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a great question. And I would say, for me, and again, I like to encourage people not to get overwhelmed with this stuff, because, it's like I talk about it all day long, and I've been thinking about these things and incorporating it into my life for, over 20 years now.
Yeah.
And so it's become second nature to me. But from that perspective, it's like I can't even really think of much of like a before and after, like, oh, like before, and then I made this one specific change, and then after I feel better. What I can say is I've been incorporating this stuff into my lifestyle for a very long time, and I feel absolutely vibrant and 100% healthy. And, I still feel, the healthiest I've ever been in my life. And so, yeah.
Probably never get sick,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Because your immunity is much stronger when, so I think thinking about detoxifying your life is sort of the, with the toxins in the environment, is the same as detoxifying your life for happiness, right? They're little pieces. The more you do, the healthier you are. And it's just a practice. And so, yeah, if you do one tiny little thing, like just get rid of plastic, but don't do anything else, you're probably not going to see a huge difference, but it's a little bit, and it's better than what you did yesterday.
Yep.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it is worth, when you mention it's the long game, I mean, that really is a good point. A lot of times, when you think about the exposure of, a sort of biological system like a human body, right, to toxins, a lot of times those toxins can accumulate over time, right? And so we have, essentially every person has what's, considered a body burden of, chemicals that they're carrying around with them that they've been exposed to, right? And some, can actually be, excreted and sort of flushed out of our bodies by various mechanisms, which is fantastic. Some not so much, right? And so, that's the whole thing, is if you're, as trying as often as you can to try to reduce your exposure, then like over time, like at X date, right, you're going to have less of a body burden than you otherwise would have, right? And that's going to translate into, hopefully, right, the idea is that that's going to translate into better health outcomes.
Better health, longer life. So there's a conversation going on Instagram, whether you believe in getting vaccinated, which might be too big of a conversation for today. And then, but does he get an annual flu shot, and has he been sick in the last year?
Wow.
So,
okay.
the vaccinations, I think, is a little bit, I think we probably only have about 9 more minutes, so I'm not sure that we can actually go into that, but
yeah.
we could save that for another time. But what about flu shot?
Yeah, I sort of go along with what the medical community recommends as far as flu shots. I mean, and I think the largest recommendation for those tends to be especially those, particularly vulnerable. So like children, or, people who are older, or have some kind of, compromise to their health, right? Like that seems to be the kind of situation where it would be, definitely more, more recommended. I personally know I have not been sick in the last year. I very rarely get sick. But the issue that I have with those kinds of vaccinations and those kinds of things, I mean, I think generally they're good for society. The science is pretty well established on those things. The piece that I don't like about it is that sometimes specific vaccinations may contain some kind of mercury compound, and mercury is a known neurotoxin and not a good healthy compound to have in your body. And I think part of the part of my issue is like, okay, well, does any particular shot, have mercury in it? And if so, why? I feel like a lot of times, for children's, shots, they'll remove that because they recognize that, this is such a risk, and they'll try and find some kind of alternative. And I'm like, well, why don't they just do that for every? And so, that's the thing. And that's just beyond, my scope, is like, why might a chemical like that be necessary in one of these particular formulas, right? And is it even in there or not, right? So I mean, you can get really detailed really fast, but I'm not like blanket against vaccinations or flu shots by any stretch.
Okay, well, that is good to know. So tell us, let's see, does anybody, if you have any more questions on Instagram, now is the time to tell us, because we are getting to close to the end here. But yeah, vaccinations is a really big topic.
That's a whole other topic. Yeah,
that can be quite big. So, so give us a couple more. We have about 6 more minutes of people just watching me listen to you, which is not which is fabulous, I'm sure. But anyway, clearly we're going to have you on again, and it's probably going to be an hour conversation because there is so much. So, and yes, they're asking if I can send his recommendations. So what I'll do is I'll post them on my website later today or tomorrow so that people can download them because there's so many more. And I'll post them on the Facebook page. Yes, sorry, Joanna, thank you. So give us, can you give us another one before we go?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say, a couple good ones are, just filter your air and filter your water, right? And those are pretty loaded, so we won't be able to get, super deep into those. But they're really, again, impactful when you're talking about, how are you kind of reducing toxins in your environment? You can't really get away from those, right? So, with water,
filter your air and filter your water. So give us a couple ways to filter your air and filter your water, like the good, better, best.
Sure. Yeah. So with the air, it's going to depend a little bit on if you have a ducted HVAC system. So like if you have a central system that has, returns and supplies, throughout your home, that's the kind of system that will have a filter in it. Or should, there's a spot for a filter, somewhere either by the return grill or by the furnace unit itself. You can upgrade those filters. Well, no, people a lot of times actually don't even realize those are there, and they never replace them, and it ends up sort of choking up the system, and it's actually pretty messed up.
I would tell you, I wouldn't even know where to find that in my house, but luckily, again, David did. So I don't have a ducted air. So what if somebody doesn't have a ducted air system?
Yeah. So if you don't, so if you do, you can kind of upgrade those, and there's some details in the notes about, what, how to think about that, because it can get a little bit technical, but essentially, you can upgrade those a little bit to provide a little better air quality. If you don't have a system like that, there are standalones, essentially like room air purifiers, right? And
like a HEPA filter.
Yeah, exactly, like a HEPA filter, right? And those are essentially, they're rated based on, the amount of space that they cover, right? Whether it's by the square foot or by cubic foot, and those can be really helpful to sort of, spot treat, some of the air you have running. And
you'll be so proud of me. I bought 2 HEPA air filters before you even drove out of the driveway, and I've been having them running. I don't have them all over my house, which, I should, but I've put one in the boys' room and one in our master bedroom. So at least when we're sleeping for those 8 to 10 hours, for the kids, that is running. And then I can't figure out where else to put it because we're in and out of so many different rooms. And so then do you have it on all the time in every room, or you just sort of keep it, if you're going to be in a room for a couple hours, you turn it on, you don't leave them on all the time?
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things that's going to depend a little bit on, right, the size of the space and what unit you got and what you're trying to accomplish. But it is one of the interesting points about air filtration is that for a closed system that's recirculating, the longer it's running and the more it's recirculating, the more it's going to capture in the filter, right? And so you don't even necessarily have to have the fanciest, most, high efficiency filter out there, because even filters that are, less efficient at capturing particles, if you run them for longer, they're still going to end up capturing more particles, right? So it's kind of an interesting point about those, but yeah.
So that's good. And then, so that was air, and tell us about water.
Yeah, water is an interesting one. Obviously water quality is going to depend for different people on, their municipal service provider and, their source of water and what treatment plant it goes through and, all of that stuff, right? So it's going to vary from person to person, depending on all of that. But regardless, I think it's actually pretty valuable to filter, your drinking water, the water you cook with, at the very least, possibly also the water that you shower in, and so
how do you filter water that you're showering in?
Yeah, so there are sort of inline shower filters that you can essentially install just right before the shower head. There are some shower heads with integrated filters as well, but yeah, you can basically just screw the shower head off, filter on, shower head back on, and just
easy.
Yeah, it's pretty easy.
So easy, such easy little tiny tips that you can do, and you're going to reduce them by reduce what you inhale, reduce what you ingest, and reduce what you put on your skin.
Yep.
I do want to tell people really quick a couple websites. Can you tell us a couple websites? Because we also talked about cleaning products, and like there's some like ewg.org.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, there's a couple really great websites out there for resources on helping inform your purchasing decisions, right? So especially around like cleaning products, personal care products, sunscreens, right? You know, there's great resources online for that. So one of them is Environmental Working Group at ewg.org. They have a great database called the Skin Deep database. And then they have, I think, a variety of other resources on this kind of stuff. And then Good Guide is another one. So that's at goodguide.com. And they have, you know, similar resources where you can search. And, you know, it's actually pretty nice because you can have, say you have a particular product you're wondering about, you can search for that product and sort of see how it stacks up. Or if you're just saying, I need to buy, you know, the most healthy shampoo I can find, right? You know, you can basically just go on and search by product type and see, you know, just pick one that ranks among the best, right? So there are different ways that you can use those tools, but they're definitely really useful resources to kind of help sort through all the information that's out there.
I love that. Seriously, we have to do this again because there's so many things that we did not get to. I can't even think of, I mean, just about what we do when we turn our stove on.
Yeah.
How to clean your carpets, and natural fragrances and whether those are bad or good. I am absolutely going to post all this on Facebook. We clearly have to do this again when we get your video working so that people can see your handsome face. And where can people go if they just want to find somebody like I found you, to have someone just come in and do it for them?
You know, that's a great question. This is not a very common service from my understanding. I don't know, send them to me, I'll do it virtually or something.
You know what? I was just going to say that. Actually. So give us your website again, because I think that's so important that if people could call you, and again, I will post it on Facebook, all your information.
Yeah.
So that people could reach out to you and you could do virtual consultations. I think that's, you know, again, at least they have some resource, some support.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So again, my company is called Green Evolution and my website is at greenevolutionconsulting.com.
Perfect. Well, I think that we are on 9:30 and sometimes I go over, but I always like to get people in and out so they know that making a habit of just adding a little bit of information into your life can be super quick, and that they don't have to be hour or 2 hour long podcasts or videos or classes. It can be in and out in half an hour. You learn something new, you do something different. When we know better, we do better. David, thank you so much. I know people are saying on Instagram how super helpful this was and how they're gonna sleep better because I know my Instagram is stuck. I know, sorry, but they'll have to see the replay on Facebook because this is just how technology works. So David, we're going to figure out how to, do this again. And I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure that people will be calling you.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yay. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.